on here. How's it going? It is Nate Mumford, Director of Sales Engineering at RCS, once again broadcasting live from my little home office here in Danbury, Connecticut, just outside our headquarters in White Plains, New York. And from Florida, we have Adrian, our GSelector Support Lead. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I am really excited. I'm really excited to have you on for many different reasons, by the way.
Awesome. Thank you.
For those who don't know Adrian, he is the man, the myth, the mind behind GSelector and support department. And he does so much, and he's just such a wealth of information as well. So I've been trying to sneak him on these Facebook Lives for the past couple of weeks. And he finally agreed to come on. So thank you for taking the time of your busy schedule too.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah. And it's fun fact about Adrian, by the way, we have the same mic setup.
Exactly.
Except that he's got a pop filter and
there you go.
I have
you got
one
yours,
too.
But it's not installed.
But the problem is when I install it, you get one of these.
Yeah, it covers your face.
And somewhere out there, a marketing person said they want to see my face, which is, I don't understand why, but sure.
Okay.
So I got into radio. So a couple things. Today we're going to talk about, Adrian's going to talk about some admin. You can see his GSelector screen right now, some job configurations as well, a couple housekeeping things, get out of the way. Want to say hi to Sane, hopefully I'm saying that right, who checked in on Facebook. Henrique, as always, hello. Thank you for checking in. Appreciate it. How's it going? As always, you can get your comments in below. We'll answer questions live in real time with Adrian here. We can also go and you can direct message us with any questions you might have or any certain workflows you want to talk about. We're going to try to focus the beginning portion of this on GSelector. If you got a question with Zeta or Zeta Cloud or Zeta to go afterwards, we can talk about that too. We're all open here, as always, every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on Facebook Live. So let's just dive right into this, Adrian, and let's talk about the admin aspects and also the job configurations as well. So go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so, I mean, today I just want to cover some of the things with regards to administration, configuration, what to do, what not to do. The first things you should be in the lookup for when you get your hands on your database, just to make sure that you have your database secure, just to ensure that backups are running. All of this is great. You just have to go in, make sure they're configured, make sure they're set. So let's talk about that part. So I have a GSelector database open here, and I have obviously different menus. So the minute you go into this tools area, you're going to see different options. If you see administration, if you click on it and it opens right up, that right there, it's telling me that it's not locked. So the administrator portion of it, at the moment, it's wide open. So you may want to go back to this and have your IT or your local administrator and just ensure that this section of GSelector is saved, is secure, is locked. So then you have your database safe. So first things to look into in here.
And Adrian, I want to comment one thing there. So we're talking about that admin. So what Adrian's pointing out here is the administrator user. And that administrator user is when you first install GSelector, there's a prompt there. You could always change your password afterwards with RCS Support's help. But everything Adrian's talking about here is talking about the administrator login. Now remember, if you have, let's say some other logins, for example, let's say it's a Nate login, it might have a different kind of profile and settings than it would as the administrator. So everything we're looking at here is done at the administrator login level, and then we can go and control it from there.
Exactly. So if you look into the very top of the screen to the left, you'll see my name in there, Adrian. That's just the user that I selected to log into this database, and that user has access. Now, Nate is correct. I'm actually logged in, but I'm actually looking into the administration portion of this. You may want to also take a look. So I'm going to close the database for a second here, and I have a GSelector icon. If I click on it, I can open my GSelector, my database, and it's asking for my user credentials. Hey, Nate, you're there. So I have George Smith there also, an employee, and I have Adrian. These are just usernames. And I have administrator. So if I select administrator, you'll notice that Also the colors will change because the skin that I have selected is different for the user Adrian. So if I go in, obviously it's not asking me for a password or anything like that. First thing you do, this is kind of like a first time thing that you need to make sure that you have set. You have to define a password for the administrator and you have to keep it safe. The way to do that is go into administration file, and again, just make sure that your IT or your local administrator does this part, not any other user. And then go here and just click on change, because there's no password at the moment. This existing password will be grayed out. So you just enter your confirmed password in there as well, and then you're set. This is the section where you define that administrator password. So what else is in here that we can define as well? We can define the logins. So we're going to talk about the logins, how that works, and how they're structured. So the first thing to keep in mind is you have organizations, roles, and users. So these are the three major tabs you're going to see here when you're working inside GSelector administration. So I mean, the organizations is, this is, by the way, this is the same naming as we have in setup. So if you're setting up your organizations, your roles is basically the same. They're not connected. This is separate for GSelector. And you have your organizations. You can define whether you want to have an organization where a user will have access to multiple stations, all stations, or just one station. So this is that area where you define that. So for instance, I have one organization here and it says description all stations. This is just a name. You can enter any name you want and you can select all the stations you want that user to have access to. So if I want this organization to only have access to the top 40, I'll go here and I'll make sure that active is selected for that one organization. And that is it. You can also, just a quick tip from this screen, you can also move the stations up and down, and this is how they will be sorted. So if you want to see alternative, in this example, you want to see it on the very top, you can use the movement arrows to move it up and down.
So and elaborate on that, Adrian. So when you say display, at which section of GSelector are we talking about that display?
That will be the stations list.
Gotcha. So from that the very top left, for example, where you say stations, the very top, that's where you can adjust which order comes in.
Right. Or this down here.
Yep.
The drop down itself. Yeah. So moving on into roles.
Also, sorry for interrupting. I just want to say, if you notice too, by the way, there's no save button in there too. So once you do it, it's going to save automatically.
It's all saved automatically. That is correct. Yes. You also have a checkbox down here. Automatically includes any newly created database, any newly created stations. So if you don't want that to happen, like if in any case you're adding different stations in a few months, you don't want that to happen automatically, you can uncheck that just to ensure that that doesn't happen. And well, moving on to the next tab here is called roles. This is pretty much where you define those security levels, right? You say, I want this person to have access to all areas because he's an admin, or I want this person only to have access to the library, and what type of access you want to give to this particular user. So if we look at this, this is pretty much the main default settings. So when you get your hands on your database for the very first time, if you're brand new to GSelector, you're going to see that everybody has the same permissions. So you may want to come down here again and define those permissions. So let's talk about how these roles are created. So again, first thing, you click on the green plus and you specify a name. You can enter any name you want. You can probably say something like library only, library read only, right? And I have to enter a description as well. I can copy and paste the same thing. You can do it based on an existing one, or you can just create your own role. I'm going to say that, and it will do it by default. So what do you get on the right side of this screen? Well, where you're actually getting in here is the kind of like the same layout that you see inside GSelector. So you can either select everything to write, to read, or to no access. So if I want to say, well, write only, everybody gets write only access, or actually read and write access, I should say. If you want everybody to have only read access, every section of the program, every section of the tabs inside GSelector, they're gonna be just read only. So no one will have the ability to edit them. Everything will be kind of like grayed out, but they will be able to see it. They will be able to run queries, run reports, analysis, and do all of that, but they won't be able to modify that data. And if you want to completely lock down, you click on no access, and well, this pretty much is kind of like not having any access whatsoever, right? So you may want to keep an eye on that. So keep in mind that the bottom buttons here are modifying the entire list. So say, for instance, I want to give this particular user read-only library access. I will click, one click, well, actually a left click. That will give them access to that, read-only. If you want to give that user access to read and write or modified, then you double left click again, and then that will give him access to the library so that he can modify it or that person can modify it.
Same thing as GSelector.
Exactly. So exactly. So I'm gonna just do one left click there, and I can see that I have no access to anything else, but I have access to read everything that is inside the library. Now, you do have subsections in here that you may want to pay attention to. So if you want the user to only have access to read, okay, perfect. But keep in mind that if you're giving a user access to read and write, meaning total control to the library, well, you're also giving them access to the multi-zone changer. Remember, the multi-zone changer is this section of the program where you can modify one asset or one zone or one link or multiple at the same time. So it's very powerful. It's very awesome.
You're not paying attention.
But exactly, but it's if you don't mean to modify 1,000 zones all at once, well, that could be a very dangerous thing to look into. So you may want to take a backup, obviously, before you use that. But it's important to keep an eye on that. And if you just wanted to keep this section kind of like out of the hands of regular users, or just want to have it completely locked down so no one will have access to it but administrators, you can set this to no access there. And that will give me just access to everything else but that, right?
And that's a great point, Adrian, because one of the things we're describing here is why you would want to create security and why you want to create your administrator username. And the idea here is that you have the organization. So if you have a big cluster with multiple stations, there's really no need for, let's say, a music director on station A to see the 6 other stations if you don't want them to see it. Corresponding with these roles that Adrian's creating here, he's establishing, like, let's say, for example, an intern or a part-timer or a music director, and just certain things you can do to essentially make some parts of your GSelector safe, but still give them access. And by breaking down each section here, what Adrian's trying to say is there's ways that you can let your staff continue to operate as normal. So adding music for a music director or a part-timer, making some changes in the categories. But again, you can see when you get to each of these sub-tabs, you have control over here of that read-only or the no access. And by the way, the no access, just so you know, when you go to that tab, I believe I'm not mistaken, Adrian, it's just got that X in there. It won't display any information on that tab, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
You will see the tab, and I will show that in a second. We will see the tab, but you basically, you won't have any access to it.
Yeah.
You won't see it at all.
And
obviously, if it's read-only, you will see it, but everything will be grayed out.
Yeah, and this is great because really look at what you want your users to do. And what Adrian's showing here is the idea that, the multi-song changer, if you're not paying attention, you don't know what that does, could be problematic for you and for your staff. So the idea here is to isolate things that you're only giving them the workflows that they should be working on, is what Adrian is showing.
Exactly. So this, obviously, we're talking about read-only, but maybe we can make it so it's library-only. And this will not allow me to get access to this. And obviously, I have some more in here. So if you want to give a user just access to modify multi-zone change, just their own station, you can do that. As you can see, there are multiple sections here that you can expand, which is great. It's a great feature. to look into and to ensure that everybody will have their proper credentials and their proper roles assigned, so then they can have total control of the station they're working on, or just limited control if you want to. So again, make sure that if you're working on a specific section here of roles, make sure not to click the bottom icons, because if I do that right now, it's going to change them. So if I say read only, it's going to change them all at once. So keep in mind.
It's really one of those guide helpful to kind of say, if I really, let's say I have an intern who I don't want them to do anything, it's that select all function versus clicking everything individually.
Exactly. So I'm going to modify this here just to say library only, and right, just to keep it clean in there. So I know it's just library only. This is read only, and this is everything. So those are my roles from the roles tab inside administration. Moving on to the user section, this is where you can create as many users as you need. These will be the database users. So anybody who will need to have access to a GSelector station, and if your station is obviously close to a limit, so then you will need credentials, you will have to have your users entering here. So first thing you do is you click on the green plus, you enter a username. This could be anything. As I enter here, I just enter my name, Nate's name, and a user's name in there, and then you enter the full name and a password. This could be a temporary password. You could leave those fields blank, and then later on, the user can change their own password directly from the login screen. You can do this, and then once you do enter all the information, you can base their credentials on an existing user. So if I want the new user to have Adrian's or Nate's or these other users' roles and station organizations, I can use it based on that. So this is kind of like a template. Think of it as a template where you don't have to do everything and assign everything. You can just pick one user, and you know that user has everything you need, and you're adding like multiple users just like them. You can use this as that template for the new users. So let me just go here real quick.
And while you create that, Adrian, I want to point out too, the reason why we highly encourage you to utilize usernames is because we've had numerous times where somebody calls in and we check the user activity report in GSelector, and they're saying, hey, somebody added or removed a song at this time. I just want to know who did it. And of course, we go in there and we say, well, the user everyone on the production computer at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday did this thing. And of course, they always ask, well, who's the user everyone? It's like, well, it's the username everyone. So this is why you want to establish, the Adrian, the Nate usernames.
Exactly. Yeah. No better way of tracking or tracing down what happened. And not because something bad happened. Maybe you just wanted to, see maybe who was working at a certain time. You can see who logged in, who logs out of GSelector from tools and user activity. But it's important to actually keep these there, so then you'll be able to identify who was in the system doing what, right? Just in case if you want to keep track of those. So from the user section here, once you have those users entered, you can define their credentials. So how do you do that? This section here, once you enter, you're going to have to define which organization, meaning which stations you want them to have access, and the role they're going to have. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a new credentials here for this particular user that I have highlighted. And I'm just going to say, this user, I want that user to only have access to the top 40 station. And I only want that user to have access to library only, right? Obviously, I added an extra credential here. You can add multiple credentials, and they're all mixed together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the all, because this is kind of like the default I use. So there it is. I can see it selected, and perfect. You can also define an email for the user. And this is kind of like the next part that I want to talk about. If you define a user, by the way, this is not a real email address, obviously. But if you want to define the email address for the user, it's important if they need to reset their password at some point. So if somebody is locked out or somebody forgot their password it's always good to have a section where you can go in and click and change your password. So for them to be able to do this, and I don't want to move aside from the main topic, is very simple. I'll explain that in a second, but essentially it's good to have that email in there, and we'll show how to change the email in there as well. But there's some settings that you have to keep in mind that your station will have to have in order for that to work. We'll cover that in a section in a moment. And once you have this, the credentials and the role and the organization for the user, pretty much all you're ready to do is just log on and start working on it.
And once again, note the save is automatic. Thank you to V,
Yes.
by the way, for checking
Yes.
in. Yes, it is a very cool feature in there.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's all automatic. If you notice, if somebody may be wondering, so what is that enable group user? We do support Active Directory. So in case if you're wondering, the users, you will need to have the users with their domain username into this list. And this is so then they will be able to connect. Obviously, there's more to it. If you want to use this, you can obviously call support or email us and we can help you configure it. But it's essentially driven by the domain server. So the group inside that domain server is what we use to identify the user by name, and then they can use their credentials, their passwords. You don't have to worry about any of that. If you want to obviously have a new user, you can add it here and they will be able to get access to GSelector with their AD credentials. So that's important. All right, so moving out of this screen, I'm going to close it for a moment. And I'm going to log out of administrator. And I'm going to log in as G. Smith or George Smith. There's no password. As you can see, the organization is highlighted for me. And if I have multiple organizations on my list, I will be able to select them from this dropdown. This is in case if a user has access to multiple stations, but for some reason they don't want to see them all together. They just want to be able to log into one or the other separately. You can do that from here. You can add the other organization to that user, and then they will be able to select it from there. I don't have a password, and I'm going to click OK because this is kind of like the first time this user is logging in. It will be presented with our information about the new version and enhancements. I'm going to say remind later for a second, and I will be able to get in.
You might have, I think, Adrian, we went to the log back in as admin. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might have unchecked the top 40 station while clicking around.
We probably did.
And while you're doing that for time purposes here, so just remember what's in there. So it's all right. So for time purposes, let's do this, Adrian. So let's go. So in this user particular, we're talking about how to add the usernames, the organizations, and the roles. And I'll help you for time purposes and just skip ahead. When you go to that window, when you go to that user, you'll see it, but it'll be kind of a little, that red X there, that Ghostbusters X will be there. So you'll be able to see it. So so that's good. So let's worry about that. We're good for there for security purposes. Before we leave this window, because I know we got to get to the jobs section here in a little bit. What's like two things in this window as an administrator that people might not realize that's there? Like, for example, the file and merge duplicates, or unmerge the identified duplicates. But what's some
there's
things here that you want to?
Many things in here that I kind of wanted to bring up a little bit. One of them important that you may want to consider is for maintenance purposes, here's where your housekeeping section lives. If you want to take a backup, this actually takes a backup for you, but this is the section where you can run your maintenance. You don't have to do this every day. You don't have to do it every week, but it really depends on how many changes you make, and if you make a lot of changes to a station or to a database, and you consider, well, I've been moving a lot of things, I've been adding stations, or maybe I move a station to another market. This is probably something that it will be good to run after those big changes. So housekeeping is there, and you have options in here. You don't have to look into every option. This is, by the way, this is all in the help menu. Very, very powerful area to look at for a resource.
One.
If you want to look at and figure out what run everything is or housekeeping, is essentially, it basically tells you that it's just running all the things that are still pending. If there's anything pending, it's compressing, rebuilding the database. It's doing a lot of the background stuff, and it's pretty powerful. Don't be scared about this purge expire schedule. It's just what it is. If you have a schedule that is older or completely outside of a log window, you don't actually see it. This is all inside, internal in the database. That may need to be purged at some point in time when it's outside that log window. So this takes care of that. So running it, I would say probably once a month or maybe less. It's totally up to you. You don't have to run it every month, really. It's
Yeah,
just
and people ask all the time, like, when should I run housekeeping? How often? And the idea, if not mistaken, Adrian, is the old metaphor I knew it as was, it opens up all of the doors and windows, and it closes all the doors and windows.
Yes.
And remember, this is a live database. Whenever you make a change, it's going through Windows and the GSelector Publisher service. It's going to your SQL database. It's making a change. There are some areas in GSelector, like, for example, creating a category or category group that is creating a new row. And let's just say, you have 15 users who are working in GSelector, and you create one small SQL row. Yes, it's going to get created. And you know what? We want to make sure that maybe once a week or something, or once a month, we run housekeeping. Does it hurt GSelector? Absolutely not. Is it going to hurt you if you run it every day? No, it's not going to. Do you need to be super paranoid and be like, Nate said I have to run this every single day? Absolutely not. I mean, we'll get to the jobs in a second here, but I mean, if it was me as a PD, I might run a Friday at like 3 p.m. or something, or a Monday at 9 a.m., depending on something in there, to run a housekeeping, just an automated job, and just be like, I know it's running. Yeah. We're good. I don't have to worry about it. You shouldn't have to worry about housekeeping.
Absolutely not. And that's why we're going to talk about jobs in a second. And this is part of that, which is very powerful as well. Other options here that you also may want to consider having a quick look at is the SMTP parameters. This is where you configure your email server outgoing. So if you want users to be able to reset their passwords and get an email notification, or if you want to be notified, say if the schedule is not done, or say if there is a service that is not running, you want to be notified of those things, right? Well, if you want to get a notification, an email notification, this is where you start. You have to ensure that this is set with your company credentials, and you just set them up, and GSelector will use this to send you an email the proper way, and it will be secure. You can enter a specific name or suffix for the subject as well. This is all optional, by the way, but it's all there. If you want to send that user, by the way, a reset code, you can check this box, and the user will get a code. The code, I believe it's valid for 10 minutes. So keep that in mind. Once we send that out, the user will have certain minutes to be able to reset their passwords. So, and the way how they do that, just real quick, is when they're trying to log in, they click on forgot password, and there it is. There's my notification. If I click OK, it will send this user or me the code, and it will last for 10 minutes. It will be active for 10 minutes. So keep that in mind if you're working through that section there. Other things to consider real quick, setting persistence. This is very, very powerful stuff as well. Again, this is a little bit going deep into the configuration of GSelector, how it behaves when you log in. But as a user, it's important. If for instance, if you want to preserve this code of your settings when you log in as you, or when you log in as Nate, you can either see things from the user point of view, or say, I want to have these settings saved, but I want to save them as me. Or if you want to save them as a station, maybe, you want a user and a station to be able to see the same kind of things or be able to see the same settings selected, you go here and you select that, and that basically will allow you to have that area available. So you have options to modify that as to inside the editor, the scheduler, and browse formats and dynamic statistics. So if you're wondering, so what is that exactly? If you're in the middle of scheduling and you always schedule songs first, right? Things like that, simple. And you exit out of GSelector, you come back in, and suddenly songs, links, notes, everything is selected again. Well, probably you're looking at first, you're probably looking at, if you're using the everyone user, you will see that kind of thing. And the reason is not because GSelector is resetting it every time, is because you're using one account and you're sharing it, which is why it's important to have your own account. And then you can consider, well, if you want to see it globally, if somebody makes a change, you want to see it globally, you can go here, you can come down here and modify this, you can make it user station or just user specific. To me, I think user specific is good. It's perfect, actually. Everybody can have their own settings. You don't have to worry about that part.
Another example there for the user versus station is sometimes I've come across a program director, let's say a OM, so to speak, and then let's say 3 different substations, and the OM likes their local MDs or PDs to go and make sure that they're conscious of certain attributes during the editor. So what you might have is, for example, like user and station in the editor, because what will happen there is when they make that change, that browse form, whatever it is, you know, if there's multiple users going in, they're seeing what the OM wants them to see. So again, some control there on those parameters. That's a very good setting, though, window there too. So setting persistence. And it's one of those things you should probably, the idea is you create the organization aspect. You create the users, you identify the Nate user, the Adrian user, and then from there, you go in that file, go to the settings, and then make sure that you define them by user. And then again, as Adrian was showing you first logged on, you can then enable dark mode, color schemes, all of that good stuff that's in there too.
Yeah. We love the schemes, by the way. And I love this dark color as well. Yeah. So let me log back in as me, if you don't mind.
And of course, we'll dive into there too. But let's, for time purposes, we have about 10 minutes left here. But let's go back to tool. Yeah, let's go right into jobs. Let's go right into jobs.
Okay. So just real quick,
before we get to Adrian, that was tools and then configuration.
Yes.
By that's where we went to there.
Sorry about that.
You know.
Yeah. Tools, configuration, and there's obviously a lot to do here, but we're just going to cover just the basic things. Very important housekeeping step, or a very first step. If you already have GSelector installed, or if you're new to GSelector, you should always consider looking into your backup path. So by default, this typically goes into your own machine, to the server machine. If you have 2 servers, this will go into the SQL server location. If you want to consider an UNC path, separate share network, that's fine.
Zip drive, like you'll have zip drives too.
Yep, exactly. So you can do that. You can keep a number of rolling backups. I usually try to keep this above 10, but the recommended is up to you. So you can obviously look into that. So we're just going to jump in directly.
Yep. And one thing too I want to mention there too, Adrian, the settings. Just be aware, again, the backup path, that is going to be your GSelector server. When the process of the backup is done, it's done by the server. Now, I'm not going to go to the 2 service hosts and the server machines for a second. I'm talking about generically speaking, a normal GSelector setup. When we make that backup path, that's going to be the path of the GSelector server. Just so you know, it's a very important key there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not your user machine. If you have a separate machine, it's not taking the backup there. So just keep that in mind. All right. So jumping into the jobs tab here, we have different options.
Sorry, I'm not sure to interrupt you, Adrian, but a couple things too. Just so you know, this jobs was introduced in what, 4.7? Not mistaken?
Yes. Yeah. It's we're adding more options later along the way, but yeah. Definitely.
So the concept with jobs here is in 4.7 in GSelector, we introduced, and again, you can see Adrian's on 4.8.1. We introduced essentially the concept of this job, this automatic process. And phase 1 was to create the jobs, I guess the job utility tool, if you will. And then phase 2 is we're going to slowly implement more and more jobs through every release of GSelector. So you're going to see this window grow over time.
Exactly. Yep. Very powerful window. Is gonna have great features in the future as well. So to get started, we just want to cover jobs. So if you have this section already selected for automatic backups, that's okay. This is essentially what SQL uses as a guide to be able to take that backup every day or every once a few hours. If you want to keep using it, that's okay. But we also have now a separate service. It's a job that it's called backup. So if you don't have if you're using an SQL Express version by any chance, you won't see this selected. You will see this grayed out. So you still have the ability to take backups from GSelector. Now, from GSelector, very simple. You can configure this by going into making sure that it's active. Make sure that it's active. Click on the ellipses, and this is going to show you some options here. Very important. You can define whether to take a database backup or a station backup. Just a quick reminder, you have a database and you have multiple stations inside of a database. So that's what the difference is. You can take a station backup. If you make changes and you need to somehow roll back at a certain point, you can restore that station only. You don't have to restore the entire entity or the entire database. So if you want to take evening backups for every station, you can do that just by checking those, or you can just take a full database backup, and that's it.
And by the way, Adrian, if you do a backup stations and you check off all of your stations, that creates all subfiles, right?
Yes.
So just so you know, if you're worried about, I want to take station backups, but I really don't want to make them all in one file, these are all individual station backups, whereas the backup database truly is everything together in one file. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. Just so you know, it's just identifying either one.
Exactly. Yeah, you will be able to restore any one of those separately. So as well as the database. The other section here that I wanted to mention is real quick is the email. So if for some reason this fails, or if you want to have a success email notification, this is where the section where you will enter your email address. Keep in mind that this uses the parameters from that section that we show you from your email section. So keep in mind that this will use that. So make sure that that works. Once you have that, you will be able to have email notifications here. So you click OK in there, and then you can define the frequency when you want to have this backup run. You can do it daily. I would say it's good to have it at least once a day, but you can have it once an hour if you like. Now, very important topic. If you're going to do a backup once an hour, keep in mind that all of those backups are going to be rolling over. So if what this means is you're only going to have 10 snapshots of your database in the past. So if you're thinking like, oh, I'm safe because I have a backup that I took a couple of weeks ago, or I know that the automatic backup is taking rolling backups and I have 10 backups, 10 different days. Well, if you're taking an hourly backup, that's different. You only have 10 hours in the past. So if you want to increase that, you can always do it. Or you can change this to say, I want to have a daily backup only. So it's all up to you. You can see when it was last executed, when it will be next executed. For me, I have it once a day rather than once an hour. But it's always good to have it there.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Just real quick, we're just going to go through some of these real quick. But if you're wondering, what is that service Heartbeat? Very important. If you're wondering what this is going to save you, I would say, some headaches. So if you have your email configured, you may want to have this selected, because if something goes wrong, say the backup failed for some reason, maybe somebody accidentally unplugged that network drive or that external drive where you're sending your backups and backup failed, you will be notified, because the Heartbeat is actually checking. It's looking for 3 different services. It's looking for the backup service, is looking at the the subscription service or the
Publisher service.
actual
Yep.
service that keeps GSelector alive, and also the licensing, which I want to mention briefly before we go. And those services, if they're not running, you will get an alert. That's perfect. That's awesome.
This is for the engineer. This is the
Yes.
engineering screen
Yes.
to go into GSelector and set some things and also set some emails so that you know that you can be identified automatically if there ever is an issue with any one of these jobs.
Exactly, exactly. Just real quick, I know we don't have a lot of time. All of these, there are some sections in here that are mostly for S3. We have an S3 model. We can talk about in a separate session or video. You can check for publication statuses, like if you drive your station based on that, if somebody exported the log or not. You can control that from here. Not control it, but actually be notified if somebody forgot to export the log. So that's very interesting to have. You can run your housekeeping. Remember, we were talking about running the housekeeping maybe once a month if you want. You can do it from here. And if it's success, if it has some discrepancies, you can receive a notification there. That's very powerful. And last but not least, you have check schedule. I think this is very, very important to have, because you can be sure that you're not gonna have a PD who would go home and then suddenly they forgot, or accidentally they forgot to export the log or generate the log, or they have some unscheduled positions that they forgot to fill up. You can use this window and say, I want to be able to monitor what's happening on a specific station. Like if I check this station, I can say I want to be able to see how many unscheduled positions an hour are, and I want to be notified if that happens, either in the future or in the past, and any sort of number of days that you want to monitor. So
Yeah.
very,
So if you're an
powerful.
OM, for example, OM or
Yes.
VP of a couple clusters, and you need to know that you have, let's say, 16 stations, 16 logs. You want to see emails at 3 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday, that has boom, 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 this log is sent, boom, 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 this log is sent. And depending on how your brain works, you can say, send me the confirmation, or send me at 3 p.m. every day if there isn't a log sent.
Exactly. Very important topic there about 3 p.m. If you have this and you're running it like every minute, or you're running this check every hour, you're going to get an email every hour until that gets fixed. So you may want to run it, probably that kind of report, you may want to run it like every either a few hours or perhaps once a day.
Yeah.
So you don't get a lot of emails there.
We're talking about concepts here. So if it were me and I was a VP of programming, I need to know that all my logs are in. What I would do is define a workflow with my staff that says everybody must have their logs in by 3 o'clock for the next day. And then I would create a reminder that says, check my logs at like 2:59 or whatever it is, and see the status.
Just real quick, I'm going to go into tools and licensing. We now have run licensing on a nightly job. This also will give you a success or a failure notification if you have that enabled. So, you don't have to worry about licensing in this case. You just make sure that your credentials are entered. Of course, these are my internal credentials, but you can enter your own credentials, and you can enter an email if you would like to be notified when a station is either licensed, or if for some reason that fails to license due to any other reason. So very important to run. There is no job visible inside the controls and jobs. So like if you're wondering, like, I didn't see a licensing job in there, like we internally we call those plugins. But they're essentially jobs that run a service as an internal service. So this will be monitored by the service heartbeat, but this actually is not displayed there because this runs in the overnight hours once. It runs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it runs around 2 a.m. There's no actual definition as to when, but we have it set so it runs in the overnight hours, so it doesn't interrupt your normal operations.
And if I'm not mistaken, Adrian, I think let's just say, I think if I'm not mistaken, hypothetically speaking, you have a virus scan or something at like 2 a.m. or something like that. I think there is a setting to change that with some support help, but don't quote me on that. I think it's somewhere in there. I thought we could change that, maybe not.
I believe so. Yes.
So just
And
so you know,
if
in
anybody has any
case,
questions about that,
yeah.
we'll answer them.
And
Absolutely.
also, remind me too. There's so many. I got so many versions in my head. Is that's for 4.8.1? Correct. That was a new feature in
Yes.
4.8.1.
Yeah.
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 And of course, obviously, any feature we add is going to be available for future releases and all that good stuff too. So I
Absolutely.
want to make a point
Absolutely.
in case you're looking at your 4.8. That's a 4.8.1 feature in there.
Just real quick, before we go, this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a bonus. If you're wondering, like, I wonder, like, if it would be possible to log in to open GSelector and go to a specific section of the program in a specific tab. You don't have to worry about that. If you do the same thing, the same steps every day, you open it up and you go straight to clocks because that's the only thing you care about. You don't care about going into the library, or maybe you go directly into analysis. Well, guess what? You can actually change that by going into, I'm going to go back there, into Tools, Navigation, Settings, and you can either say load your library, because this is kind of like the default,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or you can say I want to be able to define where I want to go. This will give you a pop-up, and then you can basically select the section of the program where you want to go. Or you can go and say, I want to have the last section that I access, I want it open. So if you were last working on links, you would go right back into links. Very powerful. I mean, because if you want to start from your left off, you can use that. If you want to specify something in particular that you want to do, I was working on grids. I always want to work on grids first in the morning. You go into a specific section and you can define that
Or the
from this
editor.
drop down. Yeah, absolutely. So again,
That's really cool.
a lot of powerful features. I mean, we obviously we don't have all the time to cover them all, but I think they're gonna make your life very easy. And of course,
Absolutely.
don't forget to make sure that your backups are safe, because that will definitely help out if something.
Speaking of, I love that, Adrian. Speaking of experience, as
Yeah,
your friendly neighborhood GSelector support lead, check your backups.
yeah.
Take your
Make sure you have
backups.
backups.
Check your backups. You can never have too many backups, but as Adrian
No,
pointed out
never,
earlier,
never.
the
Of
rolling back
course
was a
not.
great point.
Yes.
So I'll do last call here for comments or questions. So if you have any comments or questions for Adrian, again on here, you can definitely comment here below. If you have any questions you want to take offline for us, direct message us, all of that good stuff. Again, this video we copied. If you just want to go to the tools in the admin section here, Adrian. So we did just to kind of do a quick 2-second recap here. So we talked about the security aspect, how you have an organization, you create user roles, and then user-defined names for logging in purposes. And then from there, you just want to click on the file for me, Adrian. We did a quick little rundown of talking about the SMTP parameters for your email. That's in here. So if you want to email any kind of all these jobs and reset passwords, that's in there as well. And hit the file one more time. We also covered, I'm out here, the housekeeping aspects. If you want a breakdown of all those housekeeping things, you can do F1 for the dynamic help. That's going to show you all of that good stuff there. And we did the settings persistence, which is a really important setting because that's where you can define your station specific or your user specific settings. I would definitely recommend, it's a great point, Adrian, to check that out because that's color schemes, that's layouts, all of that good stuff. Hey, Rob's checking in. Hey, Rob. Rob said mentioning workstations. So this would be essentially, that would be, right? That's across all users. So obviously if you have a server and workstations, you would have essentially, these are, of course, admin defined settings that represent, that starts with the hierarchy of the server and respects anything down below. And so if you do have any workstations, it's going to respect those same stations and user defined settings, correct?
Correct.
Cool. Hopefully that's what you meant, Rob. Also, thanks to, Derek and everybody over there at CHBN. Thank you for checking in. Adrian, they said thank you very much. They learned a lot.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Thank you. And also we have, let's go to the tools and the jobs here, Adrian. And again, that's tools, configuration. Adrian made a great point about talking about the settings and defining your backups. And then we have essentially, so there's where you can find the backups. And Adrian made a great point. Just be conscious of what you're doing. You can do an hourly backup, but make sure you understand the rolling backups and the number you take. and the frequency and all of that. It goes back to the housekeeping. How many backups do you want to take? Well, what are you doing? Right? If you do a housekeeping once a week, that's fine in my opinion. If you're doing a backup once a day, that's great. I have some users that go and they do an overnight and kind of like a 5 p.m. to kind of sit there and say, well, somebody did something they shouldn't have done during the workday. I'm going to reset that work. That's in there too. Personally, I like to point out that I take current database backups because I know from my experience, I can then always isolate those stations afterwards, and it's a single file versus multiple files. Is it wrong? Is it right? It's really up to you and how you interpret it.
Absolutely.
Rob was saying, sorry, with regard to checking to see which workstations are open. Yes, boring housekeeping. I think Rob was talking about if you want to go the tools and the admin, I think he's talking about the reset the connections.
Yes. So typically, if you're running a housekeeping, if you're running it in the middle of the day, you may want to check with the connected users. By the way, you can check who is connected by going into diagnostics here. You will see the connected workstations that will be listed. The one with the asterisk is pretty much where you are at the moment. You can basically ask them to close GSelector. That's usually the recommended option. You can click here to reset the cache, and this basically what it will do is it will not close GSelector per se, but it will close the station. So it will reset that, so it will be closed. But you may want to ask them to close GSelector in case if you're doing that, or if you're doing an upgrade, obviously.
And just to kind of clarify there, and Rob brought up a good point. So in this scenario, what we're doing is we're trying to run a housekeeping for whatever reason, or maybe there's an upgrade or whatever it is. The idea is if you're an engineer or an administrator, you can go into the administration tab and then go back to the diagnostics for me, Adrian. And you can see from the diagnostic tabs, you can see who has their workstations open. And I'm telling you from firsthand experience, you do have PDs and MDs who leave their GSelector open. They walk away for the day. They will get lunch. It happens. So what we want to do is we want to identify who is currently connected. And as Adrian was saying, if you go to that file and reset the cache, all that's doing is it's not closing GSelector, it's closing the station so that there's not an active, so to speak, user in there. And then if you go to server requests, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Adrian, that's the scheduling process. So if you were just curious,
anything that is happening at the moment, if somebody's in the middle of running a schedule, for instance, you will see some of those requests popping up and going away real fast in here. Yeah. Very important topic. If you notice here, Adrian is connected. So if you have everyone, then you will see who is connected. Everyone, and everyone. So you just want to make sure that you have your users defined, so then you will know who is connected. You will still see like the IP address of the machine, but then you're going to have to trace down who is that what IP address belongs to whom. So just want to keep that in mind.
It fits perfectly, Adrian, because I was joking and saying that if you, what would you want to consider your role wise? And I jokingly said, if you want Adrian finger guns, and sure enough, I did this in the I feel like it's a perfect full circle in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So yes, again, great way of why you want to identify usernames there. And then of course we had the jobs tab, which I think we're kind of bouncing around there. And the jobs tab would just be, again, you can F1, should be in the help file, give you a description of all those. The biggest thing might be a check schedule, housekeeping, backup, and the service heartbeat. That's in there as well. And of course, I was going to say, if Adrian has any things that he loves to show in GSelector, and he beat me to the punch by showing the navigation aspect, which again was tools and navigation. And I'll do a last call for comments or questions. Again, thank everybody for checking in over there. But if you want to do, I think it's coming appropriate here just a little bit. If you want to show them that hidden version 12 selector screen in there, speaking of navigation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This has been since day one. This was actually it's a hidden version 12 little screen here. So in case you came from version 12 selector to GSelector, we hid this. And you might be asking yourself, Adrian, why didn't you show me this when I first got on? And that's because we want you to learn GSelector and not rely on version 12. But Absolutely. It is there, and it's customizable. So Adrian made a great point about you can log in to where you want to log in. You can also use this menu. You can customize it. So if there is, let's say, some quick little things you like to do, you can customize that in there too.
Yeah, and if you ask me, the one of the great features, this is a great feature, but not because it shows you how it worked in version 12. If you're moving from that to GSelector, obviously, but I would say it's very powerful if you want to use it as shortcuts. Say if you always want to go into a specific section, or you just want to have specific things listed, you can customize it. So then it's like, I want to hit F12 and I want to go right into something. With just a couple of clicks, you will be able to go directly into that screen and open, even if you're in the middle of adding new songs, this will open it. If you were adding new clocks every day, you go here and then it will do it for you automatically. So just like, if I go here and I click on add clocks, it will open the add clocks section for me. But you don't have to go click, click, click. You can just hit F12 and hit a number and it will be there right in there for you. The way how, again, we can cover this on a later feature video, you can actually modify this from this templates section. So you can define shortcuts, you can define it by user, or pretty much do a lot. I mean, it's very powerful. Right now, this is just the basic that comes in by default, mirroring what it was in that RCS menu 12 back in the day.
Yeah. And again, Rob was asking there to clarify. So tools, navigation, that's you customize it, and you'll see there's also an F12 for that keyboard shortcut for the actual menu itself.
Yeah, and this is the same section where we define the startup options. Like if you want to start up every day on a specific station, this is the place to go.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we've been talking for an hour here, Adrian, and I know that we can go for another hour if we wanted to. So
yeah, absolutely.
As always, Stan was talking about earlier, these videos are recorded for you. They're, of course, archived in our Facebook videos. I'm also going to put a high-quality version of this video. I just went to make sure that I hit record early on, and I did. They're going to be available for you on rcsworks.com. Go to the top right. You'll see there's a blog section, and every video is essentially labeled question and answers and remote workflows, and there's a description of each video. So if you are in GSelector and want to see some past videos, definitely scroll through there and check out some high-quality videos. If you want a certain topic you want covered in the future, let me know. Reach out to us. Or if there's a video you want to see that we might have already done, also reach out. I'll point you in the right direction, and we'll go from there. But Adrian, thank you so much for the time. I love your insight and all this stuff. And seriously, the wisdom here for Adrian, just so you guys know, is just like, it's amazing.
Oh,
so
thank you for having me.
Last questions, last chance for questions. I'm going to do 3, 2, 1, hit stop. Again, Adrian, thank you so much. We'll see you next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Oh, we got some good stuff lined up for you. So next week, I got Chip Jellison, our CTO, again coming on. We're going to talk about some big picture future of RCS, talking about Zeta Cloud, some of these hybrid models, if you will. You definitely don't want to miss that. That's Thursday, 11 a.m. It's going to be with our CTO, Chip. And then it's also going to be the week after that. Sports are back. So we're developing right now. I'm hopefully going to have Jeff Ziegler on. I might have Brian Willard on as well. And we're going to talk about how to create sporting event clock structures in Zeta and utilizing Zeta to go as well. That's going to be in 2 weeks. Chip is next week. And we've got some really cool stuff lined up. So can't wait for that. I'll see everybody next Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Again, Adrian, thank you so much. And
thank you, Nate.
We'll see you then.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
everybody.